A room in Revit is not just your walls, floors, and ceilings. The room is a three-dimensional object that gets placed between those floors, walls, and ceilings. And we can place a room in by going to the Architecture tab, then selecting on Room. After clicking on Room, make sure that Tag on Placement is highlighted. We want to place a room inside of these walls. We want to make sure that that room has a tag that has the room name as well as the room number associated with it. Now to place one of these rooms inside of the Revit model, we just move between the walls that we want to place this room into, and then click to place it in place. By the way, this line that you see going down in this direction and another one in this direction, this indicates the location where these lines cross of where that tag will be at when you first insert in your room object. If we want to place another room, click to place it in. Now, if we want to automate this process, we can do that as well. We just need to come up to the Place Rooms Automatically button. It'll say how many rooms it is that we've actually placed automatically inside of our model. In this case, it's created 5 rooms inside of the model. And that's just on this floor. If we have multiple floors in the building, we would have to go into each floor plan, place rooms automatically, and then it will automatically place those rooms inside of the model. Now I'll click on Close to this dialog box. And if we zoom in to that first one that we placed a room inside of, we can see that it's currently labeled Room 1. If I wanted to change the name of this room, I can just click on the tag, then select on either the text or the number. In this case, I'll select on the text, and we can see that room is now highlighted. And I'd like to rename this room Showroom. Then I'll click somewhere over here off the text. We can see that the room is now renamed to be Showroom. And because it's named Showroom, that would mean if we would take a section through the model, if we would see that room inside of the section view, it would still be called Showroom inside of the section. Or if we would look at a room finish schedule, it would be called Showroom in the room finish schedule. If we change that information in one location, it updates it in all locations. As far as the room number, we could go through the same process. Click the number and then renumber that room. And then just click somewhere out here in order to finish the renaming process. And I could do that with any of the rest of the tags that show up here in our plan view. Now, another way that we could go through this renaming process is to rename them in a schedule. And right now we don't have a room schedule. Let's go through the process of creating a very simple room schedule. Come up here to the View tab on the ribbon and select on Schedules. Click Schedule Quantities. And since this is a room schedule, we need to find that category on the list on the left-hand side. So scroll down until you find Rooms, then click OK. We have a big list of fields, and we can do any of these fields. We can see that includes such things as room finishes, the level that each one of these rooms are actually on. Really, the only 2 things that I want to have on this schedule will just be the number of the room as well as the name of the room. Select on Add to add it over here over on the right-hand side. I'd also like to sort this in order by the number of the room. So we'll go to the Sorting and Grouping tab, click on the very first line where it says Num, and change that to be Number. Then click on OK. When we do, it'll automatically create a very simple room schedule. Now, the next thing that we'll do is go through the process of renumbering from the schedule. So for this room number 2, let's renumber it 102 Office. It will automatically resort. So even before you end up doing your click or before it highlights, you will end up grabbing this room name, which is next to number 3 instead of 102. So you always need to be very careful where it is that you click when you're renumbering this. So now we need to come down here to the 102 and then change room to be Office. And now I'll just click in any of these other cells in order to finish off that naming process. If we go back to the plan view, which we can do by clicking on the little X in the corner, we can now see that the second room that we placed is now called Office 102. And we could go through this same process for any of the other rooms that need to be inside of this project. Sometimes you'll have areas like this hallway that you'll want to assign a room. Right now, it's all part of the showroom because there weren't any walls to block that off in this location. So we can use what's called a room separation line in order to block off the showroom from the hallway and then add another room right in that space. To accomplish that, we need to go to the Architecture tab, then select on the Room Separator. Now I want to click the intersection of these two walls and just draw that line straight on up to this point. Now that that separator line is in there, it acts like a wall. It keeps the room from going into this area. If I would move my cursor around until I touch one of these lines, we'll see that it actually stops there, and you'll see a little blue line that shows up there when I'm highlighting over the room. This means that it's stopped in that location, and we are now able to place a room here, which will be in our hallway area. So once again, under the Architecture tab, select on Room, click inside of the hallway. Now we can see that we have another room just placed here inside of the hallway area. As you're placing these rooms in, it will automatically number and sequence based on how you place them. The last room that we renumbered was called 102, so you'll notice that this room that we just placed here is now called room 103. And it'll also show up that way on the schedule. And you can find your schedules underneath the project browser. You may need to expand out schedules by clicking on the little plus sign. And then if you double click on your room schedule, you'll then see we now have that room 103 that we just added called room here in the room schedule. Rooms in Revit have their own set of properties. In fact, that's actually how you make your room finish schedules, is by specifying the properties of the room. To see the rooms, we just need to zoom in, move our mouse around until we get the little X going through one of our rooms, and then click to select on the room. We'll then find a lot of the properties that make up that room, and that includes the overall area of the room, perimeter of the room, and if we scroll down, we'll find information such as the room number, room name. If there's any finished materials assigned to the walls, you could even assign which wall has which finished material. And there can even be information related to occupancy, general comments you want to make about the room. So a wide variety of information that you can embed into the room object. By doing that, you could then schedule any of the properties that you see here underneath properties so that you can have your own finish schedule associated with that room. If I would zoom into our large showroom area, we can see that it currently has a room tag called Showroom 101. And the reason why it says Showroom 101 is if I highlight over this X and then click to select on the room, underneath properties, we have our number, which is 101, and the name, which is showroom associated with the room. That's actually the reason why that if we would change the information here inside of the tag, it's not actually changing the information of the tag, it's changing the information inside of the room. Your tag just happens to report back that information associated with the room. Now, if we wanted to place our own tags inside of rooms, we can do that. But to see that, we'll first need to get to a plan view that currently does not have any of the rooms tagged. I'd like to create a new view underneath the project browser. So let's come over here to the first floor copy 1, right-click on it, highlight on Duplicate View, then select Duplicate. What this will accomplish is creating a view just like the view that we were just in, but doesn't have all those tags inside of it. In fact, if you would move your cursor around inside of this model, whenever you highlight over where a room should be, you'll still see that X. That is the room object, and it's a true three-dimensional object, just like everything else in Revit. So we're just touching on that three-dimensional object. It just doesn't have a tag. So if we wanted to tag it, go to the Architecture tab and then select on Tag Room. And then any room that we wanted to have a tag, we could just move the tag over to that spot and then click to place a tag inside of that room. I could even do it up here inside of this smaller room if I wanted to, just continuing the click until we had those room tags in every spot that we needed a room tag. But if I wanted to tag everything at once, I could do that as well. To accomplish that, we'll go to the Annotate tab and then select on Tag All. That'll tag all of whatever category is highlighted. So if we selected on room tags, this means it will automatically tag all rooms with room tags. If you've linked in someone else's Revit model into your project, you also have the option to include elements from linked files. Now, we haven't done that, so there's no need to check mark this box. But if we did want to tag the rooms from a Revit project that we've brought into our own project, we would just put a check mark next to include elements from linked files, and this command would automatically tag those rooms as well. After room tags has been highlighted, click on OK, and you'll now see that every place in our model that currently did not have a tag now has a tag. If there happened to be a room that we did tag already, such as this room number 6, it will not double tag it. There'll only be one tag because that Revit element has already been tagged. Underneath the project browser, we currently have a view that we just created called First Floor Copy 1, Copy 1. Let's select on it, right-click, and then go to Rename. And I'd just like to rename this view First Floor Plan. And then click on OK. And then we'll see that this view is now a new first floor plan view inside of our project browser. When preparing a scene for rendering, consider 4 things. Where should the camera be placed? What kind of lighting conditions do I have? The time of day and location on Earth of the building, the materials that make up the different surfaces inside of our structure. Let's start by talking about our camera and its positioning. To place a camera, go up to the View tab, select on 3D View. Click on Camera. I usually like to stand at an angle in relationship to whatever I'm taking a picture of. If I was taking a photo from the inside of the building, I'd probably click somewhere in this area or this area and then take a picture, either looking out these windows or looking up in this direction. I always like to be in an angle whenever I place my camera. What I'd like to do is place my camera here on the outside of the building and about this location. I'll click once and then make this big cone go all the way around the outside of my building. Now, if yours doesn't go all the way around the outside of your building, that's okay. It doesn't have to, but just take a picture in this general direction. Notice how, because we're at an angle with the building, we can now see the building going back here to the distance. We can see the back wall. It gives us a little bit better feeling of depth. If I hadn't taken this picture in an angle and I'd stood right here in front of the windows, I wouldn't be able to see these doors. I'd barely be able to see the staircase, and I'd lose a lot of detail. The second thing is lighting conditions. So that we can discuss the lighting, what I'd like to do is find our ceilings and then double click on First Floor. We can see that we have our lights here inside of the space. Always make sure, particularly if you want to do a night scene or if you want to do a scene on the interior of a building, that you have lights that actually cast light inside of your building. Because if your lights are not casting light, those will just be dark rooms. Revit's rendering won't be able to help with that. Select on one of these light fixtures and come up here to Edit Family. This will open up our light fixture. And for this light fixture, we'll see this yellow box. If you ever edit a light fixture and you see either a yellow box, that means that that light fixture is casting light. That'll help you out. If for some reason you've put in some light fixtures, you do a rendering and the room's completely black, first thing you should always do is select on a light, edit it, and then take a look at it and see, is it capable of casting light? Now we'll close down this family by just coming up here to the X, tell that no. Lighting also does not have to just be from light fixtures. Lighting can also be from the sun up in the sky. And that's actually my primary way of lighting exterior scenes, using the power of the sun. And we can change our sun settings by coming down here in our view. Click on the sun path, click on sun settings. You can then come up here, set this to be a single day or a still rendering. You can then specify where you are in the world, the date, as well as the time. Always make sure that you have a good time of day. I usually like either sunrise or sunset to get more interesting shadows in order to do your renderings. I'll click on Cancel all that, and I'd like to go back to my camera view that we were in. Click on the little X to bring us back to our camera view. The fourth thing that we need to always check on, if you do a rendering and everything looks like it's one shade of gray, or the glass material isn't what you expected in your windows, the reason is in the materials themselves that make up these objects, we probably need to make an adjustment to materials inside of the object. Select on this wall. Come over here to Edit Type, and then select on Edit. We can see all the layers of materials that make up this wall assembly. The important material here is on the exterior side of the wall, where we have a material which is a brick common. Click where it has brick common. We can then select on the little box, and this will give us our material browser, which will show us the properties of these materials. Now, the reason why materials such as this brick common, if we have our color on inside of the scene, show up as red or have a certain pattern to them, is because of the information underneath the Graphics tab. But the way that they render has nothing to do with the graphics tab. It's what's under the appearance tab. You'll see that this brick will render as brick because of the image here underneath masonry and next to the word image. If you wanted to change that out with one of your own images, you could click here where we have the actual words for the image. Then you'll get this variety of different mats that you could select, and you could pick a different color of brick or just a different material altogether off of the list. Or you could choose one of your own photographs of some sort of material. Click on open in order to open it, which will actually load it into the materials. And I just hit cancel to that. That material would then show up here. And when you did your rendering, you would see that material on the outside of your building. I like the settings as they are, so I'll hit cancel to both of these dialog boxes. Just remember, there's 4 different things that you should set when you get ready to do your rendering. Let's look now at the NVIDIA Metal Ray rendering engine. To render a scene, make sure first that you're inside of a camera view. Come down here and select on Show Rendering Dialog. Make sure that the NVIDIA Metal Ray engine is chosen. Quality gives us different qualities of rendering. Draft is the worst quality, but it's also the fastest. Best is the highest quality, but it's also the slowest. Slow being maybe 15-20 minutes if you have very little inside of your scene, or it could be several hours if you have multiple lights as well as a variety of different materials inside of your scene. Select on Draft. We actually have a variety of different kinds of lighting that we can use. We'll use this exterior sun only, but some of our other options would be exterior, sun, and artificial. Artificial would be any lights that you've placed inside of the scene. Artificial only means that the sun won't be used and all you'll get is artificial light from the light fixtures that you place inside of the scene. And then you have the same options for interior, sun only, sun and artificial only. Usually I use exterior for outdoor scenes and interiors for indoor scenes. Interior will usually give you better lighting on the inside of the building. We usually want to use interiors if we were doing an interior scene. But for this example, we're on the outside of the building, so we'll use exterior sun only. For the sun setting, click over here and then select on Still. Now, if you want to change this to a different part of the world, you can by clicking on this box next to city location and then selecting off of this list. I'll stick with St. Louis, Missouri. I'll click on OK to that. Put any date that you want in here. The only thing that I ask for the time is make sure that the sun would actually be up. Rendering for 2 o'clock in the morning is a lot different from doing a rendering for 2 o'clock during the day, where you'll get a lot of light flooding your scene. If you set your time for early in the day or late in the day, you'll also get more dramatic shadows. I'll click on OK to that. For the background, do you want a sky with clouds in it? Do you want some sort of color in the background? If you chose an image, it could be an image of your site or any image on your computer, and then that would be the image that would render in the background behind your scene. I'll just choose sky view clouds off the list. I almost never do anything with haze. Keep this as a nice clear rendering. There's also options here underneath image to adjust your exposure. Even after your rendering is done, as long as you're using the NVIDIA Metal Ray engine, you can adjust your exposure to increase the shadows, light, and color saturation to your images. Click on OK to that, just leaving the settings as they are. Right now it's set as draft quality. Click on render. And because it's set on the draft quality, this rendering should go relatively quickly. As we can see, this does not look like a very good rendering. It's just drafts, so we still have a lot of rough edges. We have some of our mullions disappearing. What a draft is good for is seeing the different materials that we have. In this case, we can see the materials at the roof. We can see the materials that make up the glass, so we know what color the glass is. We can see the glass is actually transparent. We can see the color of the brick. We can even tell what color the plants are and how those plants can render. So draft is a basic way to start rendering before you do your more time-consuming rendering. The other thing that you can do is change it to one of the higher quality of renderings. Select on Medium and then click on Render to Medium. We can now see the glass, the brick. We have the mullions here on our curtain wall, our planting, the way that it looks. We even have a better idea what the material for our grade is. And if we would do a higher rendering setting yet, it'll start to look like a photograph as long as you have the right lighting conditions as well as the right materials applied inside of your scene. Whenever you're done doing these renderings and you finally have generated that rendering that you'd like to have, down at the very bottom where we have image, you can either adjust the exposure to fine tune the way that it looks. In this case, I'll just click on OK because I'm going to leave it as it is. You'd have two different options. You could select on export, in which case it'll ask you, where do you want to save the image? This will allow you to save an image out, and then you could use that in presentations, send it in emails. Click on Save the Project. I'd like to just call this Render View, and I'll click on OK. And now we've saved this rendering to our project. Click on the red X to get out of the dialog box, and suddenly it looks like the rendering went away. That will happen whenever you get out of your rendering dialog box, but because we saved it to the project, here's the original 3D view called Render View. We'll see that we now have a category called renderings. And this is the render view rendering that we just saved to the project. Double click on that. We'll then be able to see this render view rendering.